This warning from the CEO of the nation's largest automaker, General Motors, about the impact of the tariffs on the car industry. Mary Barrett told shareholders the tariffs on imported cars and auto parts will cost GM between $4 to $5 billion this year alone, slashing earnings projections, though she did thank the Trump administration for walking back some of the levies on imported parts and raised hope of further changes to come. And CNN's Erin Burnett is with the GM CEO right now. Erin.
All right, John, well, thank you very much. And General Motors CEO Mary Barra joins us now. So as John just said, Mary, GM cut the forecast for earnings up to 30%. You gave a range, but earlier this week, you'd suspended all future guidance earlier in the week because of the sudden change in tariffs. So, Mary, I really appreciate your time. When you did that unprecedented step of suspending the earnings forecast because of Trump's tariff adjustment earlier in the week, you also suspended your stock buyback program to conserve cash. And now we've got this letter you've put out. I know you're going to be talking to investors just moments after you finish talking to us. But when you look at the situation here, the tariff exposure that you put out is $4 to $5 billion. What does that mean, Mary? Do you assume that you're passing some of that cost on to buyers or not?
Well, when we look at the overall $4 to $5 billion impact from tariffs that we shared, that is what we know now based on the clarity that we're given, and we are very appreciative that the president provided that clarity. We actually delayed this conversation with you and with our investors for a couple of days because we knew we had been working with the administration for several months, working with the president and many members of his administration. So they understood our industry, the complexities of the supply chain, and the capital-intensive nature of our business. And so when we understood that announcement was actually, and the actions were going to become official on Tuesday, we thought it was better to wait and be able to provide the guidance that we did. As it relates to the $4 to $5 billion, there are many steps that we can take to offset. For instance, we've already added more than 50,000 on an annualized basis trucks that we'll be building in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And there's other moves that we can make. We already have a very U.S.-centered supply base. Over 80% of the parts that go into our vehicles are already USMCA compliant, and the lion's share of that is U.S. So there's many steps that we can take to offset the $4 to $5 billion, but we wanted to be transparent and share. That's the impact right now.
So, just looking through this, though, of course, February 1st, tariffs were announced, then they changed in March, then they changed again in March. Now they've changed in April. I mean, Mary, I know you've spoken to President Trump directly about the tariffs. When is the last time you spoke to him? And was it this week, post his most recent shift? And has he given you the confidence that this is it, that you actually know the rules of the game and they're not going to change again?
Well, I spoke to the president when I last visited the White House, but I've been speaking to many members of his administration multiple times a day over the last several weeks. So I've had regular communications and really feel that the White House and the administration are listening to understand the situation. And so we do know that there's more conversations going on. For instance, the negotiations going on with Japan and South Korea, China, and many of the other countries that impact from a supply chain perspective. So we think that there's more impact potentially. But again, right now, the clarity that we got was so important because it allows us to make decisions for our footprint in the U.S. and in North America to be able to respond to the tariffs and make sure that we have a growing and strong U.S. auto industry.
So yesterday, Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, was with us here yesterday morning, about the same time as you and I are talking right now. And he said that he cannot commit to not raising prices this summer. Okay, so he was very clear about that, Mary. But he did say they are extending their employee pricing to all consumers through July 4th. I know that GM thus far has stayed away from incentive pricing. Are you going to have any incentives for buyers, whether employee pricing or anything else, between now and July 4th?
Well, if you look at our portfolio, the strong ICE, our internal combustion engine and EV portfolio that we have been able to maintain strong pricing and low incentives because customers want our vehicles. And so what we've said is we believe, and what we provided in our guidance is that pricing is going to stay about at the same levels that it is. And when you talk about whether you use employee pricing, those are just different tools to provide incentives. We're going to stay very disciplined in our incentives. We're one of the lowest in the industry from an incentive perspective. And so we're going to continue to evaluate pricing. I mean, pricing changes in our industry at least monthly and sometimes more frequently. Incentive levels change, et cetera. So we're going to respond to the market. We're going to stay disciplined because it's so disciplined that we protect the residuals of our vehicles because that's important to our customers from a resale value.
Yes. I'm just curious, though, because obviously $4 to $5 billion, it's a massive amount of money, but trying to put it down to what it means to the price of an individual car. Patrick Anderson Economic Group, and it does the pricing per car, right? So for GM, Mary, he looked at the Suburban, the Yukon, the Escalade, and with the new tariff adjustments, so obviously a little bit of an improvement in the overall tariff impact on a car, he still gets to a tariff impact for each of those vehicles of about $8,000 a car. So $4 to $5 billion on earnings can boil down to, if you're going to go buy an Escalade, to $8,000. I guess the bottom line question is, Mary, is GM going to eat the whole $8,000, or are you going to have to pass some of that to consumers and soon?
What we are going to do is work to get U.S. content up. And for the vehicles you're specifically talking to, they're made in Texas, and with 80% USMCA compliant parts, the tariff on those vehicles is actually quite a bit less than the number that you're talking about. So we're going to evaluate each product, but I think for pricing, it's so important in our industry that we stay competitive. And for General Motors, we continue to leverage the strong demand that we have. In the first quarter for those vehicles specifically, we saw a 30% year-over-year increase in demand for those products. So I think that speaks to the strength of our portfolio, and it's a differentiator for General Motors.
All right, Mary Barra, we very much appreciate your time. Thank you so much for that this morning.